Noah raised a hand and pointed at herself, her brows knitting in genuine confusion. How could Muen possibly envy her? The admission caught her off guard. It had never crossed her mind that someone as free-spirited as Muen might look at her with admiration. Seeing her sister's bewilderment, Muen hopped down from the bench, landing lightly on the ground. She bounced on her heels, hands trembling with restless energy as she rushed to explain. Noah had it all wrong, she insisted. To Muen, Noah was smart, capable, and endlessly responsible. Always looking out for her like an adult, always taking first place. The words tumbled out in an eager rush as Muen recited every quality she admired. Even if Noah didn't notice the small steps she was taking forward, Muen did, and it made her happy, grateful even, to have such an incredible sister beside her. That was why she wanted to be just like Noah one day. Noah's eyes widened at the unexpected praise, warmth creeping into her cheeks. The sincerity in Muen's voice left her flustered. She had never realized her sister saw her that way. For a moment, she searched for words, lips parting only to press together again. Finally, lowering her gaze, she managed a hesitant, stammered reply. Noah didn't even know what she herself would be like in the future. Undeterred, Muen tilted her head, clasping her hands behind her back in a casual sway. "What do you want to be in the future?" she asked, her ocean blue eyes glimmering with curiosity. Noah hesitated, the question settling over her like a quiet weight. She let the silence stretch, searching for an answer. Before she could speak, familiar voices drifted toward them. Looking up, she saw Leon and Rossweisse making their way over, Leon carrying a small bag of drinks, Rossweisse sipping leisurely from her own. They were deep in conversation, their playful back and forth carrying easily on the breeze. Noah's gaze lingered on them, and in that moment, her answer took shape. "I want to be the person they already believe I can be," she said at last. Muen's face lit up, her laughter soft and genuine. As it turned out, her dream wasn't so different from Noah's. When Leon reached them, he crouched down to hand out the drinks, offering an apologetic smile for the wait. Muen accepted hers with an eager, "Thanks," grinning brightly. Noah took hers more quietly, murmuring her gratitude. Rossweisse stood beside them, watching her daughters with a faint, contented smile before taking another sip from her cup. The resort erupted in a symphony of fireworks, brilliant colors bursting across the horizon. Each explosion painted the night sky with vivid hues, like vast flowers unfurling in the darkness, or like lanterns, one after another, kindling warmth in the hearts of those who watched. Noah and Muen leaned against the railing of the observation deck, their faces lifted toward the heavens as the fireworks danced above them. The shifting lights reflected in their eyes, transforming their gazes into living constellations. For an instant, it was as though fragments of falling stars had been caught within their pupils, making them shimmer with wonder. Noah's lips parted in quiet awe as she absorbed the spectacle. Beside her, Muen released a delighted gasp, unable to contain her excitement. Noah followed the direction of her sister's gesture, her voice rising in soft praise, nearly drowned beneath the crackling brilliance of the sky. Not far from the observation deck, Leon and Rossweisse sat together on a stone bench, their daughter's joy unfolding before them like a private performance. Beside Leon rested his camera and the small bear doll Rossweisse had given him, tokens he kept close while he simply watched in quiet contentment. Rossweisse's gaze softened as she observed the girls, her voice little more than a murmur. Seeing them this happy, this trip hadn't been in vain after all. Leon let out a quiet chuckle, his eyes lingering on Noah and Muen's radiant expressions as the fireworks painted them in shifting light. No, it hadn't been in vain. It was good they had come. As their father, he wanted to capture every fleeting, precious moment. His hand reached instinctively toward the camera beside the teddy bear, only to grasp at nothing. He blinked, frowning, before turning his head. The camera was no longer where he had left it. There it was, in Rossweisse's hands. She held it with casual ease, idly scrolling through the day's photographs. Leon's pulse quickened, though he forced a veneer of calm into his voice. When had she taken it? Ross Weiss's tone was light, almost playful, as her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. She only remarked that she was curious to see what he had been capturing throughout the day. During the day, when no one had been watching, Leon had slipped away to the resort's photo studio under the excuse of using the restroom. It had been a miscalculation. The photos couldn't be developed on the spot. Now that mistake returned to haunt him. Ross Weiss's scrolling halted on an image of herself feeding deer, her brows lifting in mild surprise. When was this taken? She wondered aloud. Leon's throat went dry. Just a few swipes further and she would find it, the bunny girl photo, still sitting in the camera's memory. Think, Leon. What would the master do in this situation? His mind spun frantically, grasping for any distraction. Fingers tugged restlessly at the fabric of his clothes until they brushed against something in his pocket. The candies. He had forgotten them since this morning's outing. A spark of hope flickered in his chest. Perfect. Forcing composure, Leon drew out 2 candies and extended them toward Ross Weiss with an easy smile. She barely acknowledged him, still absorbed in the photos, though her lips parted instinctively in expectation. Leon swallowed back a sigh. Of course, she wanted him to feed her. Unwrapping the candy with deliberate slowness, he leaned closer and guided it toward her mouth. Ross Weiss accepted it absent-mindedly, her attention still fixed on the screen, until realization struck. Her eyes widened, head snapping up at their sudden closeness. Both recoiled at once, turning away with tightly shut eyes, color rising in their cheeks. The silence stretched, awkward and heated, before Ross Weiss's voice broke through, edged with flustered protest. Why had he gotten so close? Leon's response came just as defensively, his words stumbling over one another. Hadn't she been the one who opened her mouth? Ross Weiss avoided his gaze, though her eyes strayed once more to the camera in her hands. As she scrolled through the gallery, a quiet realization took hold. There were countless photos of her and the girls, yet not a single one of Leon. He had spent the entire day behind the lens, never once in front of it. A trace of hesitation crossed her features before she lifted the camera with newfound resolve. They should take one together, she insisted, if only so their daughters would never wonder why their parents had no photographs side by side. She stressed the practicality of it, her eyes shifting away as though to dismiss any other implication. Leon, unaware of the thought beneath her words, met her suggestion with an easy smirk. Amused, he praised her foresight and played along without a second thought. As Ross Weiss adjusted the frame, a small frown creased her lips. Leon's face wasn't fully in view. Closer, she instructed. His head was too large for the shot. Leon scoffed, the corner of his mouth twitching with amusement. A centuries-old dragon, he mused, still flashing peace signs like a child. Yet despite the jab, he shifted nearer until their shoulders brushed. The camera captured the moment before either had the chance to think twice. Though he had teased her, Leon found himself unconsciously mirroring Ross Weiss's pose, raising his hand in the same playful gesture. Their fingers formed identical V-shapes as the shutter clicked, sealing away a rare photograph of the two of them together. When the fireworks display drew to a close, Leon and Ross Weiss purchased sparklers from a nearby stall. One by one, the sparklers hissed to life, spilling flickering light across their faces. Ross Weiss twirled hers in wide arcs, playful as ever, while Noah darted after her with an unlit sparkler, pressing its tip until it caught fire in a crackling burst. Laughter rang out, mingling with the night air, their faces glowing gold beneath the shower of sparks. Meanwhile, Leon and Muin sat together on a stone bench, the evening chill beginning to creep over the mountainside. Worn out from the day's excitement, Muin curled into his arms, her small frame heavy with drowsiness. Concern flickered in Leon's chest as he felt her shiver. He draped his coat over her shoulders and held her close, ensuring she stayed warm. His gaze drifted outward, toward Ross Weiss and Noah still chasing each other across the deck, their sparklers painting trails of light. Their usual composure had melted into pure, unrestrained laughter, and Leon found himself smiling at the sight. Looking down, however, he grew puzzled. Normally, Muen would have been the first to join them, bounding off with boundless energy. Yet here she was, choosing instead to remain in his embrace. Muen nuzzled deeper against his chest, mumbling sleepily about how tired she was. Then, in a whisper almost too soft to catch, she added that she wanted Noah and Rosweise to have more time together. Time they so rarely shared between school, work, and responsibilities. Leon's breath caught. Stroking her hair, he felt a swell of emotion at her thoughtfulness. She often claimed she didn't understand what it meant to grow up, but in moments like these, her love for her family shone brighter than any sparkler. His eyes stung. He shut them, letting a few tears slip free as he held her closer. Noah and Muen expressed their love differently, but the devotion at their core was the same. He thought about gently rousing her to join the others, but before he could, the soft rhythm of her snores brushed against him. She had fallen asleep mid-conversation, her tiny hand fisted in his shirt, lips parted in peaceful slumber. It was then Rosweise and Noah returned, their sparklers burned to embers, their cheeks still glowing with excitement. Rosweise peered down at Muen, her voice hushed with tenderness. Leon answered only with a quiet nod, his arms tightening slightly around their sleeping daughter. The night had grown still, the last sparks fading from the deck, but warmth lingered between them all the same. With another nod, Leon signaled it was time to head back. He bundled Muen securely in his coat and lifted her with practiced ease. Noah stood nearby, arms crossed, her expression neutral, but in her gaze flickered something softer, something that looked like longing. Rosweise noticed, as she always did. She bent slightly, meeting Noah's upturned eyes with a gaze of quiet understanding. Without a word, she opened her arms in silent invitation. Noah froze, her blush immediate. She hadn't expected to be seen through so easily. After a brief hesitation, she ducked her head with an embarrassed smile, then stepped forward, surrendering to the embrace. Their walk back to the hotel was slow and peaceful. At one point, Leon glanced sideways, catching the sight of Noah nestled in Rosweise's arms, her face hidden shyly against her mother's shoulder, as if shielding herself from the world. The first day of their hot spring trip had ended well, or so Leon thought. Back in their room, Rosweise reached for the camera, intent on reviewing the day's photographs. Yet before she could settle, Leon had already shed his clothes down to a pair of loose shorts and was striding toward the private hot spring in the backyard. He paused at the sliding door, glancing back over his shoulder with a playful grin as fireworks from the resort burst into brilliant color behind him. Planting both hands on his hips in exaggerated invitation, he asked Rosweise to join him in the hot spring. Rosweise blinked, caught off guard. Somehow the night had shifted in a direction she hadn't expected. Inside the hotel resort, the lights shone brightly before dimming one by one as the night settled and everyone drifted to sleep. Rosweise and Leon tucked their daughters into bed, while Noah and Muen whispered their goodnights. When Leon and Rosweise entered their own room, they closed the door behind them. Leon immediately collapsed onto the bed, relief flooding him that the day had finally come to an end. Rosweise stood watching him sprawled across the double bed, arms folded. She asked whether he intended to sleep. Leon pushed himself upright at her words, his expression darkening. With a venomous tone, he insisted he would do no such thing. Gathering himself, he rose from the bed and turned his back on her. Closing his eyes, he dismissed her gently but firmly, declaring that he would take a hot spring bath and that she should rest first. Rosweise offered no reply, only a faint smirk tugging at her lips as she watched him stride out toward the outdoor hot spring. Around the pool, clear water trickled steadily from between the rocks, its soft gurgling filling the air and blending with the rising steam to cast the spring in a hushed, mysterious atmosphere. Leon undressed, changed into a pair of loose shorts, and slowly stepped into the pool. The water was warm, soothing without being too hot, perfect for his weary body. Almost at once, The heaviness of the day seemed to melt away. He let out a contented sigh, resting his arms along the rocks and leaning back against the edge. With his eyes closed and his body embraced by the warmth, he murmured to himself that it had been a fulfilling day. Even in the midst of tranquility, the thought of sharing a bed with Rosweiss lingered in Leon's mind. Tilting his head toward the night sky, he pondered how to resolve the matter. If he wanted to enjoy a comfortable vacation, he would need to find some excuse, any reason, that would spare him from sleeping beside the Silver Dragon Queen. As he searched for a way out, the back door suddenly slid open, breaking his train of thought. Rosweiss stepped into view, and Leon's eyes widened in surprise. He had expected her to be resting, not wandering into the hot springs at this late hour. As she approached the pool, Leon instinctively folded his arms tightly across his chest, his heartbeat quickening. Pressing a hand against his sternum, he muttered under his breath, wondering what she was doing there. Rosweiss caught the unease in his posture and found it oddly perplexing. She had no hidden intentions, yet his reaction made it seem otherwise. With a calm, casual air, she questioned why he was so wary, reminding him that she had no plans to do anything to him. Running her fingers lightly through her hair, she explained her reason for appearing. The grand finale of the fireworks show was about to begin. Having nothing else to occupy her, she had decided to go downstairs and take photographs, and was simply looking for the camera Leon used to capture their travels. When Rosweiss mentioned that she was searching for the camera, Leon stiffened. His hand rose to scratch his face, and his gaze flicked nervously behind him. He had hidden the device beneath his coat on a chair beside the hot spring pool, hoping to keep its contents safe from her eyes. To his dismay, she immediately noticed it. With quiet certainty, she remarked that he had brought it with him after all. Leon's effort to conceal it proved useless. Shock rippled through him. His eyes rolled upward, his mouth opened soundlessly, and for a moment he seemed frozen in disbelief. He had not expected her to find it so quickly. Unease clawed at him as Rosweiss stepped behind him and picked up the camera. Calmly, she announced that she would be taking it. Leon's head snapped toward her, his face draining of color, eyes wide with dread. If she carried it away, she would inevitably uncover the secret stored inside. He would have no way to explain himself. Silently, he pleaded for her to reconsider, praying that the blackmail material he had gathered on the Silver Dragon Queen would not fall into her hands. Frantic for a solution, Leon's mind raced. Then an idea struck him. He surged to his feet, water rippling around him as he planted both hands on his hips in a bold, almost theatrical stance. With forced composure, he invited Rosweiss to join him in the hot spring. At that very moment, the resort's grand fireworks finale began. Explosions of color streaked across the sky, blooming like flowers one after another, their dazzling radiance painting the night with a brilliance that stole both breath and attention. At the sound of Leon's voice, Rosweiss turned her head toward him. The booming fireworks overhead drowned out much of his words, but she caught enough to pause. Setting the camera aside, she arched a quizzical brow, her expression marked with curiosity and faint puzzlement. Leon, flustered by her gaze, quickly averted his eyes. He cleared his throat, coughing a few times as if to mask his unease, before repeating himself more firmly. Since it was rare for them to visit such a place, he suggested, they ought to enjoy the hot springs together. For a moment, Rosweiss's eyes widened, leaving her speechless. Then, regaining her composure, she brushed her fingers lightly across her cheeks as if to cool the warmth there. A soft, mischievous chuckle slipped from her lips. Placing one hand on her hip, she warned him in playful defiance that she had brought along a rather charming swimsuit, and he had better not lose his composure. Leon's heart thudded nervously, the weight of her words hitting him hard. Forcing a smile, he pointed to himself with feigned confidence, declaring that a dragon slayer of his caliber should be able to withstand any kind of temptation. Rosweiss accepted his response without pressing further. With a single decisive motion, she closed the back doors behind her, the loud thud followed by the whisper of curtains being drawn. From within, her voice carried through, teasingly reminding him to remember what he had just said, Dragon Slayer. Leon stood motionless in the steaming pool, the night sky still ablaze with fireworks. Leon shook his head and closed his eyes, forcing away the cascade of uneasy thoughts. It was just a hot spring bath, he told himself. What could possibly go wrong? Clenching his hand into a fist, he fixed his gaze forward with determination. To keep Rossweisse from discovering the incriminating photos and unleashing consequences he could never undo, he resolved to rely on his wits. Even if it meant enduring no small measure of discomfort, he would endure it. Before she returned, he quietly recited the Dragon Slayer's Code of Honor, the 3 honors and 3 shames of the Dragon Slayer, murmuring it under his breath like a protective mantra. With the ritual complete, he sank back into the steaming water, preparing himself for Rossweisse's arrival. In the pool, a large toy duck and its smaller companion drifted lazily across the surface, bobbing with the ripples as though they, too, were awaiting the inevitable. Overhead, the fireworks finale blazed on, scattering bursts of vivid color across the night sky. Their reflections shimmered against the water, illuminating Leon as he leaned back against the edge of the pool, trying to appear calm. The sudden creak of the back door broke his composure. His head turned sharply toward the sound. Was she finally coming? Rossweisse slid the door open and stepped outside. She was dressed in a deep purple swimsuit, its edges trimmed with delicate white lace. The design was modest yet elegant, hugging her figure with quiet grace. Her chest and midsection were fully covered, though her bare shoulders caught the firelight, gleaming as if dusted with starlight. One hand held the doorframe for balance as she crossed the threshold, and with each step, she seemed to glimmer beneath the cascade of fireworks, making her way slowly toward the waiting water. The moment Leon saw Rossweisse in her swimsuit, he dipped his head, shoulders trembling as he tried, and utterly failed, to suppress his laughter. A loud chuckle burst free, echoing across the steam-filled spring. One hand clutched his stomach, while the other slapped against the surface of the water. He had braced himself for something far more daring after her earlier teasing, yet what she wore was nothing close to what his imagination had conjured. Unable to resist, he mocked her, questioning if this was truly the so-called daring swimsuit she had spoken of. It hardly seemed capable of testing his resolve, let alone stirring the dragon mark etched on his body. Rossweisse's expression soured instantly, her brow furrowing in irritation. She hadn't expected Isabella's choice of swimwear to look so plain under Leon's scrutiny. With a sharp retort, she accused him of being far too smug, reminding him that the swimsuit had been a gift from her sister. Leon eventually quelled his laughter, though a smirk still lingered at the corner of his mouth. He muttered that her sister's fashion sense was certainly an odd one. As Rossweisse stepped toward the pool, Leon immediately moved to intercept. Reaching out, he offered his hand to steady her descent. She accepted without hesitation, carefully lowering herself into the water until she was seated against the wall. Once certain she was settled, Leon quickly retreated to the opposite end of the spring, lowering himself into the steaming pool while deliberately keeping his gaze turned aside. A heavy silence spread between them, broken only by the faint rippling of the water and the distant crackle of fireworks fading overhead. Leon thought the atmosphere was even more awkward than he had anticipated. Cracking one eye open, he risked a sidelong glance at Rossweisse. In truth, he felt quietly relieved that her swimsuit had not been as provocative as he had feared. Had it been otherwise, he doubted he could have lasted a moment longer in the pool without fleeing. Rossweisse studied Leon in silence, noting the way he kept himself at a deliberate distance. His restraint amused her, and a faint smile curved her lips. With teasing curiosity, she asked whether he was afraid that even a glance at her might stir the dragon mark he carried. Her words struck true. Irritation flickered across Leon's face, and he turned sharply toward her, retorting that he feared nothing. But his voice faltered when his eyes dropped to her figure. Something was off. His posture stiffened, and in an instant he shot to his feet, pointing at her in shock. Puzzled, Rossweisse glanced down. What she saw made her breath catch. The purple swimsuit she had entered with was no longer the same. Sections of the material dissolved away in the water, leaving patches far more revealing than she had ever intended to show. In that moment, she realized the truth. Isabella had planned this. The swimsuit had been enchanted to change when wet. Roswitha could almost see her sister's mischievous grin in her mind, savoring this very outcome. A rush of heat flushed Roswitha's cheeks, and she instinctively raised her hands to shield herself. For a moment, she felt a sting of embarrassment, chastising herself for not suspecting Isabella's trick. But the hesitation soon melted into something else. This was, in its own way, an opportunity. If the suit was now daring, then she could use it to test him. A sly smile replaced her blush. Perfect timing. Slowly, deliberately, she began to move toward Leon through the water. Each crawl forward sent ripples across the pool, her motions carrying a quiet allure that made Leon's chest tighten. His face burned red as she closed the distance. He tilted his head toward the sky, refusing to meet her gaze, his voice breaking as he suggested she ought to change first. Roswitha only smiled more enigmatically, ignoring his words. She pressed herself against him, closing the last bit of space between them. One hand lifted, fingers brushing lightly across his chest, leaving trails of heat in their wake. In a low murmur, she reminded him that the great dragon slayer, who had triumphed over countless dragon kings, should hardly be afraid of her. The feel of her against him, soft, deliberate, and undeniable, sent Leon reeling. His pulse raced, his composure fraying by the second. He realized with dawning alarm that he was losing control of the moment. Somewhere beneath the chaos, he made a silent vow. He had to find a way to turn the tables before Roswitha completely overwhelmed him.